So if you don't mind, tell us your name and your Urantia Book story.
Well, I'm Paula Thompson, and I am the director of the Urantia Book Fellowship, which was formerly the Urantia Brotherhood. I grew up the daughter of a police officer and a store clerk, a retail store clerk in Southwest Denver. And I felt a calling of ministry on my life when I was about 10 years old. And I was sitting on the curb with my friend Carol Champlin, and I was comforting her because her parents had gotten a divorce. And I was really doing the best I could to give her some comfort and help her through that hard time. And I had my hand on her back, and we were sitting on a curb, and I just felt that was ministry and that I was a minister, and I needed to pursue that. I felt that calling. I guess it's hard to describe. But I've been in love with Jesus and God all of my life. I don't remember a time, even as a tiny child, that I wasn't fascinated with Jesus and fascinated with God. I grew up feeling like God was my best friend and that He was always with me and there within. And I was on a search. I really felt like, I wanted to know Jesus especially better. And anything about Jesus, any movie about Jesus, any book about Jesus, anything about Jesus, I was very interested in that. I had an experience when I was 10 and I was essentially kicked out of the church for wanting to hear the minister speak. And then when I was 16, I got involved with another religious group. And that was pivotal for me because this was, my family largely stopped going to church when I was 8 years old. And so 2 years later, I wanted to go hear the minister speak. And because I was a kid, they wouldn't let me stay and hear the sermon. And then I never went back to that church after that. That was the church I grew up in until I was 8 anyway. And then after that, when I was 16, I got involved with another religious group. And my family was a little concerned about me. And my brother brought a friend over one night, and we were sitting around the kitchen table having a conversation, and this friend of my brother's, an old family friend, he brought a girlfriend with him. Never seen this woman before nor since, but she gave me one of the greatest bits of advice I ever had. She said, a lot of religions claim to have the truth, and maybe they do have the truth, and maybe they don't, but anything that grinds against your natural belief, you have the ability to know the truth when you hear it. And anything that grinds against that, don't believe it. You don't have to believe it. If it grinds against you. And there was something about that really stuck with me. And it wasn't long after that I kind of had that experience with this group. They told me that God was going to kill my family, my mother, father, at Armageddon, if I wasn't able to convert them to their truth. And if that happened, it would be my fault, and I didn't want to live with that. And I stopped right there. And I said, you know what, I don't believe God's like that. You say God is going to kill my mother and father, but they're the best people I've ever known. And if God's going to kill good people, He might as well kill me too. I don't want any part of a God like that. You may think it would be paradise living forever with a God that killed your loving family, but that wouldn't be paradise for me. That would be hell. And of course, she didn't want to hear that, but I was adamant. And the words of that lady, that friend that came to visit that night, I didn't accept it. It grinded against me, and I didn't accept it. And I walked out of her house that day, and something shifted in me. And I felt this surge. And I said a little prayer. I'll never forget what I said to God right there in that moment. I said, God, you may be just the way they say you are. And if you are that way, I'm sorry. I can't worship you. And then as an afterthought, I said to God, somehow I think you're not that way. But you're going to have to reveal yourself to me, because I'm not getting involved with any more religions. told him those exact words, you're going to have to reveal yourself to me because I'm not getting involved with any more religions. And 4 years later, he revealed himself to me in a way that I never dreamed possible. And it came at the worst time of my life, of my young life. And maybe, I find there's a great irony in it. The worst thing that ever happened to me is also the best thing that ever happened to me. The worst thing that ever happened to me was losing my dad at 20. He was my hero, my best friend. He was my consoler. He was the one person that could make me feel better when it seemed like the world was caving in on me. He was always there for me. He was my best friend. And I didn't fully realize it until after he was gone. And the starkness of that, losing him at 20, 2 days before Christmas, was crushing to me. And it was crushing to my whole family. He was that for all of us. And so we went into this grief that was just unbearable. And all I could do was pray. And I kept hearing the still small voice, which I know now is a still small voice. And maybe I didn't know it then as much as well. You have to find the good news. And so I started searching for it. And I went to the Bible because where else would it be? And my need was so great. And the Bible, I tried reading it, I'll tell you, I tried reading it from cover to cover because I thought, first I tried thumbing through, trying to find it. I had 2 questions specifically that I wanted answered. I wanted to know where my dad was, and I wanted to know that he still was. I wanted to know that he still is somewhere. He still is. And I couldn't find it. And so I thought, okay, I'll read it from cover to cover. Surely it'll be there. Well, I got to the begats. I got that far, and I threw the Bible down, and I said, what I'm looking for isn't here. And I told God, I need to find the good news soon or I'm going to lose my mind. It felt like my heart was dying. And I sobbed, please show me the good news. Within days, my first husband, who is dead now, he died in 1982 in a car accident, called me from jail. He was in jail for possession. And he said, when you come to visit on Saturday, will you bring 1250 with you? And I said, well, what's it for? He was 20 years old, had a year-old baby, trying to hold our lives together. My dad was gone, my husband was away in jail. What's it for? He said, it's for this book. I said, what kind of a book? He said, it's a spiritual book. What kind of a spiritual book? It's called the Urantia Book. And I'm reading it with some friends here. We have a study group going. Just bring 1250. I want this book. And I remember thinking, what kind of book would have this man's attention? What kind of spiritual book would get his attention? Because he had issues. And I thought, well, if it's a spiritual book and it has his attention, it's a good thing. So I told him, okay, I'll bring it. And I scraped it together and I brought it. And I met my dear friend Buck Weimer in the parking lot. I didn't know he was my dear friend at the time. I gave him the 1250, he gave me the book. I took it into the visiting area and took it out of the box, cracked it open. It cracked to the life and teachings of Jesus, birth and infancy. And I started reading about Mary and Joseph, the color of their hair, wonderful details that are in this book and the way it's written. And I thought 3 things. I'll never forget what I thought. I thought, that's not in the Bible, And then I thought, who would pretend to know that? And then I thought, if they would pretend to know it, why would they? And I told my husband, I think I need to read this book. He said, I know you do. You take it with you. I said, but what are you going to read? He said, it doesn't matter. You take it with you. And I just knew it was the answer to my prayer. You can't imagine how badly I wanted to read the Jesus papers. I wanted to read them first, but I wouldn't let myself because I felt more compelled to read that entire book than anything I've ever felt in my life compelled to do. And I started with the foreword and I began to read it. And it took me 3 years the first time I read it, from cover to cover. I had a little baby. I couldn't read it every day, But when I did read it, it fed me. And I felt my heart come back to life. I really did feel like there was a divine hand watering me And so I never forgot that. I never forgot that. The affirmation of Jesus' words, seek and you will find, ask and you will be answered, knock and the door will be opened to you. And never, the affirmation of that, I prayed with all my heart and I got this answer that was more than I ever dreamed. This revelation. I had rejected this other religion because that was not my God. And I told God, you're going to have to reveal yourself to me. And he did. And the first 5 papers, which is what our study is about this week, those first 5 papers on the nature and attributes of God, they fed my soul like nothing I've ever experienced. That was my God. That was my God. I could fall on my face and worship that God. The God of love and mercy and sympathetic understanding and,
In other words, a God that made sense.
The God that made sense. The God that, that was my God. And that fervor has lasted all these years. It's never lessened, it's only gotten greater. It's never gone away. And as I read that book, not only the first 5 papers, but the 5 papers on the Son and the 5 papers on the Infinite Spirit, and the 5 and on as it unfolded to me, this great panorama. It's fed my soul like nothing else, and I burned. I guess I'm an evangel by nature. So like I said, I was called to ministry, right? My concept of Jesus was not dogmatic in any way. My first memory of Jesus was my mother singing Away in a Manger to me to help me go to sleep at night. I must have been about 3, and the only reason I know that is because of where we were living at the time. We moved away from there when I was 4. So I was between 3 and 4 probably. I had a hard time sleeping at night. It's a family trait. My grandchildren have it, my children had it. So it was hard for her, but she was patient, and she was a great mom, and she was singing Away in a Manger to me. And she got to the part of, the cattle are lowing, the baby awakes, but little Lord Jesus, no crying he makes. And I thought, Jesus was a baby, like me. And I felt this wonderful, warm, radiant energy come over me. It was just like, oh, it was so beautiful. And I knew, I equated that with him. Now I would tell you that was his spirit of truth, bearing witness with my spirit, the truth of that thought, that Jesus, that simple thought was true. Jesus was a baby like me. And the Spirit was bearing witness with my spirit, and I felt it. It was a very real feeling. And I drifted off to sleep in that warmth, that sparkling, radiant energy of the Spirit of truth, Jesus' Spirit of truth. And it set me on a lifelong goal. And in fact, the reason I wanted to go see the Father speak at 10 was because when I knew him growing up until I was 8 in his church, Father Myers, he was an Episcopal minister. He had the most radiant, beautiful smile. And every time I saw him, he would look down at me and just radiate this loving warmth and energy to me. And I thought, you're a lot like Jesus. Jesus was a lot like you. And I wanted to meet these people of Jesus. I wanted to meet these people who loved Jesus and knew Jesus like that, like him. And so when I was 13, my mother talked me into, she didn't have to twist my arm or anything, but she said, Paula, you got to watch the movie Ben-Hur. You'll absolutely love it. And I watched that, and that movie really changed my whole concept. I mean, that movie was so powerful and profound to me. And I watched it anytime it would come on. It was my favorite story of Jesus up till then. And the way they depicted him by depicting how he changed the lives of others. It wasn't a movie about Jesus, but it was all about him. And it was about how he changed people and how he gave them hope and courage to carry on. And that movie moved me very deeply. And when I got to the crucifixion scene, I just bawled. I didn't have the concept that other people have that, oh, this is a good thing because he's taken the way, you know. I didn't have that dogma, or so let's say the atonement concept where, you know, wash me in the blood or anything. To me, it was appalling that they would treat him that way. And so...
Or that it would be in a plan that he should be treated that way.
Yeah, I couldn't, of course, you know, but it all kind of fed into my growing concept of God, my personal experience of God. I just couldn't, but I was deeply moved by it. I watched every movie about Jesus I possibly could. At that point, I was unchurched until I got to this other religious group when I was 16, and I was only with them for about 9 months before I said, you know, that's not my God. And so then I found the Urantia Book when I was 20. I wouldn't let myself read those Jesus papers as much as I wanted to. I got through the rest of the first 3 parts of the book, which I loved. And then I got to the Jesus papers. You can't even imagine, because I had this concept now of the cosmic Jesus, Jesus before he came to this world, and who he was, Michael. Oh, I had this concept of the Creator Son, and the local universe Mother Spirit, and all of their children in this universe. And I got to the life and teachings of Jesus, and I was so ready. I was an open book. And I started reading that section, and I cherished every word. It was like there was nothing in that was incompatible. Nothing. It was my Jesus, just like the first 5 papers were my God. I mean, it's hard not to get choked up. He is my master. He gets me there. I love him so much. When I even think of it, my heart swells. He lives in my heart. And he said that. I stand at the door of men's hearts and knock. And if they will open up to me, I will come in and sup with them. He's been my constant companion. He's gotten me through a lot, as has my Heavenly Father. They're the dynamic duo in my life. So there's nothing about Jesus in the Urantia Book that isn't precious and sublime, absolutely sublime to me. Nothing. I wouldn't trade it for anything. Not for anything. It's you know how the book says, a feeling too deep for words? Yeah, that's what it is. It's you know, some words have no meaning, some meanings have no word. And Jesus in the Urantia Book, the Jesus that I've gotten, the human Jesus, the Jesus that had brothers and sisters, the Jesus that loved Martha and Mary and Lazarus, the Jesus with his apostles. It's a meaning without a word. So there you go.